First thing you want to do is take some images. I found these images online, just pretty much NASA photos of Jupiter up close. Pretty much if you type in Jupiter maps on Google Images, you're bound to find something. But I'll put these in the link description below. So I'm going to make my composition in terms of height very high. I set this to about 1975 in terms of height, but I'm pretty much going to keep the width the same. Pretty much what we're going to do is create a map that we can use, and since Jupiter is a pretty much gas planet, it would tend to move in kind of this Milky Way, so we're going to try to create that illusion just through the images, so essentially making these images move. So I'm taking these two images, compositing them together, and pretty much just creating a map that we can drop into CC Sphere and create a pretty realistic looking interpretation of Jupiter. So I'm essentially just masking around. Now, if you do this properly, feathering won't necessarily be 100% necessary, but for just the purposes of this video, I am going to feather them just to make sure everything kind of, there isn't any clear cuts or between the images. So feather that. Perfect. And you can kind of, play around with this until you get something that you're happy with. To me, these kind of all line up pretty nicely. It doesn't need to be perfect because, again, this is just so we can create movement in Jupiter and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily need to do this part, but again, I just want it to be slightly perfect. All right. Okay, I think that should be good. Okay, next we're going to go to turbulent displace. Now, turbulent displace is a great part of After Effects because what it essentially allows you to do is kind of liquefy or stylize an image. It's good for if you're trying to do like trippy, weird sequences. I've used it many times in the past. But pretty much what we're going to do is bring down the amount to about 28 and the size to 67. And with offset turbulence, we're essentially going to just move the offset turbulence to the right, and that will kind of create these bumps that will move. So it's kind of like animating the image. All right, so now I'm going to set a keyframe for my offset turbulence. Move it to the end of the sequence with the timeline, and just essentially move that to the right. And as you can see, we can already kind of see the animation happening, especially if we run through it quickly. But again, you want it to be somewhat subtle. You don't want to have it too fast or it's going to look way too obviously CGI or animated. So just having slight movements when you're using turbulent displace can go a long way. So we're essentially going to do this to all the layers. I'm pretty much just going to copy and paste what I did here. So Control C and add that to the other layer, Control V. And add that to the other layer, Control V. So now we can see, maybe not quite as fast now, but as we go through the timeline, we can really see the movement. And it adds a sense of realism than just kind of taking an image and adding CC Sphere, because you're not going to get the same amount of detail or realism. So this also looks very cool and kind of trippy in a way and fun. I think that we can roll with this. So I'm going to layer pre-compose this, and I'm just going to call it Jupiter Milk, something like that. Kind of a funny name. Doesn't necessarily make sense. You can name it whatever you want. Anyways, all right, now we're going to go to composition settings, and we are going to bring down the height back to the original 1080p. That's pretty much standard for editing. So 1920 by 1080, and I'm just going to downsize this so it fits into our comp. So now we're going to add CC Sphere. So kind of looks kind of funny at first, but as soon as we kind of scale it up, we can see that it's starting to take shape. So we're just going to scale that up, maybe go to the radius, make it a little bit bigger. All right, perfect. Okay, so now you can, within CC Sphere, you can actually see the rotation and you can move around. So although we're using two-dimensional images, we're able to actually create the illusion that it's 3D. Now next week I'll get into how to do this with genuinely using 3D plugins like Video Copilot's Orb or Element 3D. But considering that I understand a lot of people may not have access to these plugins, considering that they cost money, creating the illusion of 2D images simply within After Effects is something that can go a long way. And you don't necessarily need these plugins to create the cosmos or cosmic effects. So I'm essentially going to start creating my glow. I'll call this quite simply glow. Put it below my layer. It's actually looking pretty decent. Okay. And we're just going to, by using the masking tool, we're just going to make this about the same size as Jupiter, roughly. Kind of just creating a perfect circle. And we're going to put that around our layer. So this kind of creates, once we mask it up to size and all that, you want to have the outer layer sticking out. So the glow needs to be slightly outside of Jupiter for it to create that illusion of some kind of atmosphere. Now, I might have to do more research on this, but I don't necessarily know if Jupiter has a noticeable atmosphere because it is a gas planet pretty much. So, but for these purposes, I think that it looks cool within the video, and that's kind of what matters to me right now. So just kind of creating something that looks cool. So scale that up a little bit. Move it a little bit to the right. All right. Okay, perfect. So now we can see that Jupiter is perfectly placed in to our bottom layer, which is the glow. And now we're actually going to add glow, and we're going to bring down, we're going to turn up our glow radius. As you can see, we have this nice outer glow. Maybe feather it a little bit, not too much, maybe 25. All right. So again, we can rotate around this, find a position that we like the most. I think that for me, to me, this very evidently looks like it is Jupiter. So no matter where you really rotate it, I think it should be pretty fitting. I'm just going to adjust some few things here. Maybe essentially flip this so we get a slightly different pattern. All right, go back to our layer. And that's the cool part, right? It's like now by pre-composing these elements, we can actually go back and add things or change things, and that will immediately affect what we're doing in this timeline. So I think that's very valuable. Now I'm going to go to light and maybe turn the light intensity up a little bit. And again, CC Sphere allows you to kind of choose the light direction. For me, it's almost as if After Effects made this this effect for creating planets in a two-dimensional space, which is really cool. So I think we're going to kind of play around the glow. I'm not loving it right now, so I'm just going to kind of adjust it a little bit till we get something we like. Okay, I think I'm just going to get pretty much rid of the feathering. I don't think it's necessary. All right, got to downsize that a little bit. I don't want the glow to bring too much attention to itself. But yeah, all right. Okay. Change the light direction. Now, the thing about when making a planet, the lighting aspect of it, where the lighting is to essentially simulate the sun or any kind of, bright light within space. When a planet, usually when planets look fake, if you're doing this, it's because you're revealing too much of the planet. So something you want to keep in mind is playing around with the light and having shadows within the planet is very important in creating the feeling of realism when it comes to space effects. Because, again, this could very easily look fake. And again, like, it might be that it will, no matter what you do, kind of look fake. But here, essentially what I'm doing is adding to those shadows. So for instance, although this part, as you can see, is covered, the only part in the light should be the left side. To get rid of that glow, I'm essentially just going to create a black solid and mask around that glow, as you can see here. And of course, feathering it so that way it blends in better. But kind of just adjusting that so the glow isn't too revealing and it's not too obvious. All right, perfect. So as you can see, that gets rid of the right side glow. And now you can see that this is actually looking pretty good. This is looking pretty real, and it's all about that lighting. That's what's key here is, you know, when you're working in this kind of space, or when you're working with space, lighting is a very important aspect because either things will never be seen or things will be seen in the frame. And it's all about playing with that balance of what is lit and what isn't lit in the frame. So again, you don't necessarily need to have this, the right side of Jupiter. It could be the left side of Jupiter that's revealed, or the top side, or sorry, the top or bottom, whatever works for you. But for me, often I like having the left side being revealed or the right side. Okay, so now we're going to create the stars. So to do that, it's very easy. We're just going to create a layer new solid, add fractal noise, and we're just going to call it stars, just to keep us organized. We're going to bring the contrast all the way up pretty much as we can, and bring the brightness all the way down, or vice versa. Now we're going to go to transform, bring the scale to around 7. I would go at max 9, and drop down the brightness. So now we have these stars. We drop that in the bottom layer, and it's looking pretty good. I'm liking the way this is looking. Seems like the black solid is also not interfering with the stars. I don't think it's I think it's looking pretty good. Okay, now we're going to add essentially a camera. So we're going to go layer, new camera. I like using 35mm. That's kind of standard for me when it comes to the options. So by using the camera tool, we can essentially adjust the zoom in, the zoom out, the pan ups or the pan downs, or if the camera is moving left to right. But the issue, before I go any further, the issue with two-dimensional effects is that it's very hard, well, two-dimensional VFX, is that it's very hard of where the camera is going. You only have so many options. It's either up, down, left, or right, or zoom ins and zoom outs. That's really all you can do, or tilt shifts, which is still a lot. But when we go into next week's video where we show you how to do essentially what we're doing now in 3D space, there's so much more you can do. I mean, you can have the camera rotate completely, a whole 360 rotation. But what's good is that here we can maybe create the illusion of more of movement within the planet by adjusting the CC sphere's rotation. But that's not what I'm going to do here. But I'm just saying that's something to keep in mind, is that you might be a little bit limited when it comes to camera movement in two-dimensional space. So remember that when you're working. But again, you know, for a shot like this, I don't really think we need anything too epic. I think it stands on its own. I think it actually looks really good. Now I'm just going to add a simple color correction. Now, you can definitely use curves or anything. I have a video I did a few years ago, but I'll probably update sometime in the future about color correcting within After Effects with no plugins. But honestly, I've been so used to using Magic Bullet's film plugin that I always use it. It is kind of pricey. It's about $150. This is one of the few plugins I've actually bought and not torrented. Just saying, don't at me. You can probably torrent a lot of shit, just saying. But anyways, this is probably one of the few plugins I actually have bought, and it is kind of pricey. But from like anything from Magic Bullet. But it's just such a great way of getting a cinematic look very fast. So, okay, I'm just gonna create a layer, new solid, and I'm gonna add, or make it, sorry, I have to make it comp size. Could have just hit make comp size, made it a lot easier. I'm gonna add lens flare. Now, I do have optical flares. That's usually what I use, but again, I'm trying to keep this as realistic as possible for people who probably just started using After Effects, and you know, I'm not gonna be one of those assholes that makes these things that are impossible to make, and the only way you can make it is by using like 30 plugins, because that's just not realistic. So essentially what you want to do is the plugins that come in After Effects for lens flare, which is literally just called lens flare, you get kind of these cheesy looking lens flares, but if used correctly, you can actually kind of get something you like with it. So what I usually do is I add lens flare. I choose either the 35mm prime or the 105mm prime, and I just add camera lens blur. So when you add a camera lens blur, it kind of hides the very obvious cartoonish aspect of the lens flare plugin. So by just adding that blur, it makes it come off a little bit more realistic and less noticeable. So I'm just gonna add screen. Sorry about that, was my phone. Move that out of the frame. And now we get something like this, which also kind of works, right? It's like this nice outer glow, kind of simulating maybe a distant star or some kind of sun. I don't know if I'm going to add a color correction. I think it kind of stands on its own. Move it out of frame a little bit. All right. And I'm going to scale that up so we can hide the blur distortion that kind of happens on the side there. But again, you could change to a 105mm prime, 50, 300mm prime. I think honestly, the 50 to 300mm prime for some zoom, that works really well here. So I think I'm just going to keep that. So there we go. And I think we're really getting an image here that is very nice. Now again, with color correcting, you really want to play with whatever it is that you're using. Again, I know that it's annoying that I'm using a plugin, but I will be posting a video on color correction definitely in the future, so you know, keep your heads up for that. All right, I think this is looking pretty good. I might add, definitely gonna add camera movement to that, but I think I'm just gonna add pretty much letterboxes, which are pretty much the aspect ratio that you want it to be played in. So I kind of like creating the simulation of a wide screen, or I don't know what the word is for it, to be honest, but essentially adding these letterboxes, which you probably know by watching movies and stuff like that, creates this really cool cinematic experience where it's like a wide screen. Creates a nice sense of scale. I always add letterboxes. I think that it just really amplifies the work. Now we're going to add a blue haze, and we're going to hit screen. Again, I'm going to put links in the description to all the links, all the photos I used, so you guys can just simply download them and not have to worry about finding them yourself. So if you don't necessarily want it to be a blue tint or some kind of blue haze, you can just simply add tint to the blue haze, and you can change that to any color you want. I mean, if you want maybe to reflect the sun more, an orangey haze might suit it better. But honestly, I think I like the blue haze, so I'm just gonna leave the tint. Maybe it's not the most realistic, but I'm getting kind of Star Wars vibes just looking at this. Does look like it. All right. Okay, that's pretty much it, guys. I think this is looking pretty good. I might just add, a quick camera movement to this. So for me, I kind of just select all the types of rotations, everything. But again, like I'm showing you here, right? Like you can move left or right. You can move, add a tilt shift or some kind of tilt to the camera. You can go up and down, and of course you can zoom in and out. But that's still a lot of things you can do within 2D space, but it won't maybe compare to what you can do in a 3D space. But again, I'm going to be touching on that in next week's video. So I might just adjust where, by using CC Sphere, where I want things to be shown. So I think that's pretty nice. All right, guys, I think that concludes today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and let's have a look at the final look at this shot.